History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jody Sowell, president of the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis, and this is History Spotlight. Winters in St. Louis aren't quite what they used to be. Public historian Andrew Wonko takes us back to when temperatures were so low the Mississippi River actually froze over.
So it's pretty rare today that we would see the Mississippi River freeze over at St. Louis. Most people presume it probably never happens. St. Louis is maybe too far enough south that just doesn't happen here. But it actually turned out it wasn't so long ago that it was a very regular thing. And when the Mississippi did freeze at St. Louis, for some people it meant fun, for some people it meant opportunity, and for other people it meant complete disaster. Through the 19th century, every winter, St. Louis's levee would become crowded with steamboats from northern ports all along Iowa and Illinois up through Minnesota and Wisconsin. These boats were coming south because the river would freeze farther north. But every once in a while, that freeze made it all the way south to St. Louis. In the bitterly cold winter of 1856, the river froze at St. Louis to 18 inches thick of ice. And it lasted for 6 weeks, giving St. Louisans plenty of time to go out and explore their brand new real estate where there once was water on their front door. For most St. Louisans, the frozen river meant fun. People took to the river in droves, having the chance of a lifetime to get to step out on the river itself, even though city politicians warned them every single year that it happened not to do that. They set up skating rinks, they set up saloons, they had mid-river bonfires, they had parades out on the frozen river. And because gambling was actually illegal in St. Louis in the mid-1800s, and the river itself was outside of Missouri territory, they even set up gambling houses out on the river. So people took to the river in huge numbers to have fun. A little bit further down the river, other people were using it for opportunity. The breweries here in St. Louis, of which there were many, they chopped huge blocks of ice off the river and used it to cool their beer. Other entrepreneurs chopped up blocks of ice to sell it to downtown's hotels and restaurants. Even Bellefontaine Cemetery, in a little bit more morbid use, used frozen river ice to keep its receiving crypt cool all through the 19th century. Coal companies over in Illinois took advantage of this new road they had, and they had horse-drawn carts of coal being pulled across the river every chance they could to keep their costs down for transferring coal by ferry, as they usually did other ways. So for lots of St. Louisans, the frozen river meant opportunity and fun. But then, of course, for others, the frozen river became a disaster. On the morning of February 7th, 1856, St. Louisans walked down to the levee and noticed that some of the levee's dozens and dozens of steamboats had actually been nudged up onto the dry cobblestones. It was a little bit of a foreshadowing of the disaster that was about to come for the steamboat owners along the St. Louis levee. The huge blocks of ice out on the Mississippi River were breaking up, the ice sheet was cracking, and the ice was beginning to flow downstream. And for all of those very fragile wooden steamboats, they would just have to be carried alongside as the ice did whatever it would. The newspaper reports for that day mentioned that thousands of St. Louisans went down to the river's edge to watch as all of these steamboats were crushed and mangled as these giant mountains of ice piled up. When the all the ice finally melted later that spring, St. Louisans found debris scattered everywhere. Brass chandeliers, boilers, pieces of chimneys, all the delicate spindle work from the steamboats was littering the levee as all of these boats simply had to let the ice do what it would. The Mississippi River doesn't freeze as often as it used to anymore for man-made reasons. Now that it's been caged up in miles and miles of floodwalls and levees, the Mississippi is deeper and its channel is faster, which makes it much harder for it to freeze. Also, the locks and dams just north of St. Louis act as a sort of strainer. They catch all that river ice that's coming down from the north, and they don't let it get through to St. Louis. It's only on the most bitterly cold of years that we might see a frozen river at St. Louis again.
Next week on History Spotlight, get in the holiday spirit with Christmas at Sticks Bear and Fuller.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org.